Good day, friends. On 9th of August, which is yesterday, the Chief of the Air Force, he gave a speech in Bangalore. And as part of that talk, he spoke about the role of the Indian Air Force in Operation Sindoor. And he said that in this operation, the Indian Air Force, it shot down six aircraft of the Pakistan Air Force. Five, he said, were fighters, and the sixth one, he said, was a big aircraft, either a Elent aircraft or a AEWC aircraft, which was shot down at a distance of 300 kilometers. And all these six kills, confirmed kills, they were done by S-400 system. Now, this is big news. And equally big and important is the fact that this is the first time that the Indian Air Force, that too at the highest level, has spoken about its role in Operation Sindoor. Now, we know 3 months back, the day after the air battle got over, which is on the 8th of May, the Pakistan Air Force gave its own presentation to the international audience, and that was done by a senior officer, Air Marshal Aurangzeb Ahmed, where he said that the Pakistan Air Force had shot down six fighters of the Indian Air Force. So both sides are claiming the number of six. You see, it does not matter what is the narrative of the Indian side or the Pakistan side. What matters is what the world thinks. What matters is what the global experts think is possible based on the technical, technological, and the operational capabilities that the two sides have and the evidence that the two sides have provided. So, what I intend doing in my video is that from the perspective of a global observer, let us look at the two presentations and how plausible they are. Now, as far as the Pakistan side is concerned, a key thing said by Air Marshal Aurangzeb to the international audience was that even before the Indian Air Force launched Operation Sindoor, the Pakistan Air Force had electronic identification of all their assets. Everything which was an electronic emitter, whether it was the jammers or it was the aircraft or it was the radars, everything. Now, this is big thing. Because when you talk of electronic intelligence, that means for that you need good electronic warfare. And we know that Pakistan Air Force has it. Because in August of 2020, with help from PLAF, the Pakistan Air Force set up Center for Artificial Intelligence and Computing, where their top or primary objective was working on cognitive electronic warfare, which is putting artificial intelligence and machine learning in electronic warfare, taking it to a very advanced level. Surely, over the last 5 years, they would have worked a lot on electronic warfare, and therefore, what Aurangzeb said, that they had good electronic intelligence, that is very much possible because they have good electronic warfare. Now, when you have good electronic intelligence, that means you are in a position to make a very good electronic order of battle, a framework knowing fully well what asset of the enemy is where. And once you have a good electronic order of battle, based on that, one can make a very good, credible electronic warfare offensive campaign. So you see, one things lead to the other. So when we have these two things, which is a credible electronic warfare campaign capabilities and an electronic order of battle, this then is at the heart of the war concept that Aurangzeb spoke about, which is the multi-domain operations. And this combination is what is needed for a competitive, if not a superiority in the electromagnetic spectrum. I'll just come to that, why it is important. Now, as far as this war concept is concerned, the multi-domain operation, it basically means that all the assets which are there in space, airborne assets, ground assets, they are all data linked with the fighter. And the key thing here is that in all these assets which are data linked by software, there should be a free flow of information. And hence the importance of electronic warfare, and hence the importance of having a superiority or a competitiveness in the electromagnetic spectrum. Then we also know that this digital ecosystem, which is what leads to the war concept of multi-domain operations, this the Pakistan Air Force has been exercising, doing advanced exercises every year since 2019 with PLAF, which is their Shaheen series of exercises. So they have been exercising in this. And therefore, when we look at the hardware that they had used in this operation, which is the combination of J-10 aircraft with the PL-15 missile, a BVR, Beyond Visual Range Advanced Missile, it worked very well with this digital ecosystem on which the Pakistan Air Force had been training for the last 5 years, 6 years rather. And how this worked is that it was the airborne asset, perhaps, which did the identification and the tracking of the Indian fighter, and that information was passed to the fighter from their airborne asset to their own fighter, which is J-10, without the J-10 pilot opening his own radar. Otherwise, he would have given his location away. And based on that information that the fighter got, he released the missile PL-15, which I said is an advanced missile. It is a missile that went 200 kilometers. So initially this is pre-programmed. It has its own inertial navigation system. Then this missile has a two-way data link, which obviously would have been with the airborne asset. And in the terminal phase, it has its own ISA radar to lock on and get the target. This is how this whole thing worked. So the point to make here is very simple. The modern warfare, or the warfare that we are talking of today, it is the age of BVR missiles, beyond visual range missiles. And for that, it is important that electronic warfare has to be very good, because this is how it works. Good electronic warfare will bring you to the multi-domain operations, and they in turn provide the backing, the digital ecosystem to this BVR missile firing. So all this is possible that they've been talking about. And they've also provided evidence about their claims or the kills that they have made, and plenty has been said on this, so I won't say any further. Let's talk of the Indian side now. The presentation or the talk given by the Air Chief. Now, the Air Chief, he spoke only about the Air Force fighters, uh, only in respect to the first night 6-7, where he said that they were used on two targets at Muridke and Bhavalpur. And thereafter, he has not mentioned the fighters. And then, in summing up, he gave all that was taken out by the Indian Air Force. And in this order, he mentioned two command and control centers of the Pakistan Air Force. There are 6 radars, big and small, then 2 SAM systems, then damaged runways, then 3 hangars where the F-16s were there, perhaps for maintenance, and an AEW aircraft. And then he spoke about the S-400 that took out these S-6 aircraft that I mentioned in the beginning. So when he was talking all this, he put that in the end, the taking out of the Indian fighters, the Pakistan fighters. That was in the end, he said, which is a bit strange, because this should have been the lead of what he wanted to say. Okay. Now, his narrative is absolutely plausible, taking this out with S-400. Because I recall 5 years back, I was there outside Moscow where this army exhibition, defense exhibition is held, and I had a long chat with a senior representative of Almaz Ante, the company that manufactures S-400. And he confirmed to me that it is a very advanced and a good system. It's a mobile system. It's a shoot and scoot system. And this system has the capability to detect targets at 600 kilometers. It can track 300 targets at one time, and it has a variety of missiles. Its long range missile is a range of 400 kilometers. So when the Air Chief spoke about 300 kilometers, it's all plausible. So all this is doable. So far so good. But now the problem starts. The first thing that comes to mind is that why did the Air Chief not identify the type of fighters which were brought down? He said 5 fighters. Because There is no doubt at all that this system, it can detect the targets at 600 kilometers, and if the target is small, then certainly at 400 kilometers, and the chief was talking about all targets within 300 kilometers. So he should have identified what were these fighters, JF-17, F-16s, J-10s, what? He didn't do that. So this is intriguing. Second, he provided no evidence at all of what he said. Next, how was it possible that for all these 3 months, nobody in the world picked up or knew about this? That so many aircraft had been lost by the Pakistan Air Force. It's a big thing, but nobody wrote about this. Then, we also know that as far as Americans are concerned, they have this end user monitoring clause with all the countries where they give their assets. So, obviously, if there was a damage to F 16 in the hangar, or if it was shot down by the S 400, certainly the news would have come out. It's very surprising that this didn't happen. No news was heard on this at all. And here is the thing, a very big thing, that the government of India, it came out with an official press release of the Ministry of Defense about the talk given by the Air Chief, which did not mention about the shooting of these 6 aircraft by the Indian Air Force. And the release is here for the viewers to see. And of course, the next question is the timing. Why is it that the Indian Air Force spoke about such a big news after 3 months? Why not at that time? But I'll answer this question in a while. Now let's move on to the next thing. And the next thing is that in all his talk so far, the chief only spoke about the surface to air missiles. Basically, he was talking about the BrahMos, he was talking about LR-SAMs, he was talking about the S-400s. So we know that they are important in the Air Force when we are talking of air superiority. They support the fighters, they are important. But they by themselves are not enough to have an air superiority because they are all defensive systems. As far as BrahMos is concerned, we know it's a land attack offensive strike capability, and that's fine. But as far as the surface to air missiles are concerned, they're all defensive. So the requirement of the fighters is critical because they are versatile and they provide the offensive capabilities needed for air superiority. And we also know that all these defensive systems, the surface to air missiles, whether you S-400 or any other system, you just buy the system, and what they require is a unidirectional skill. It has various components. It is a teamwork. It has a radar. It has a command and control system. It has then launchers. So the point I'm making is that this unidimensional skill, it can be picked up very fast. It's not a big deal. The big deal is with the fighters and the pilots, because that is where uh, it is not a teamwork. The pilot, he is both the single source of success and failure, and the pilot is operating in a hostile environment, which is a three-dimensional environment, and it is under severe G forces. So on top of that, now we are also talking about a digital ecosystem backing the fighter. So the point to make is that this is the most important part of the Indian Air Force, and this is the reason that the chief talks about when he talks of the capability of the Indian Air Force. He's talking about the combat squadrons, their strength. And this is the question the media also asks him. So, all this that the Indian Air Force or what the chief has said is about these defensive systems, air defense systems. So, what about the fighters of the Indian Air Force? Well, he didn't say much about that, but we heard about that from the Chief of Defense Staff, General Anil Chauhan. It was when he was at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore. This was on the 31st of May that he spoke to the Bloomsbury television, and he said in response to a question that in the initial stages there were losses. How many he didn't specify, but he said we rectified tactics. And on 10th of May, we went in full force. Now it becomes very obvious what rectification of tactics he's talking of. Obviously, instead of the fighters, they brought in these systems, the defensive systems that I'm talking about. So the big question still hangs, something that should have been answered by the Air Chief. What happened to the Air Force on the night of 8th and 9th? Was the Air Force grounded? These are very critical questions. Now, this was not said. Now, next is I was referring to the timing. Why was it not spoken of? Such a big news that six kills had happened for 3 months, and why suddenly now? So, for that, please watch this clip. This clip I have picked up from the Twitter from a handle Times Algebra, and I have attributed to that handle also. Please listen in.
You went into Pakistan, you attacked Pakistan, and you told our pilots, do not attack their air defense system. Meaning you told our pilots, go and attack and face the air defense system of Pakistan. Meaning you tied their hands behind their back.
If I can say, what were the reasons for success? One, which I can think of, is that there was political will. I'm being very, very candid here, very open here, because I hear various versions of it. I think if I tell you something, people will have to believe, because I was there listening to everybody, attending every meeting. There was very clear political will, very clear directions which were given to us, and there were no kind of restrictions which were put on it. Many people have spoken somewhere. Unfortunately, everybody is speaking about it. कि कुछ ना कुछ मैं बोल दूंगा इस बारे में. So there have been talks about, was there any restriction? Were you kept constrained? If there were any constraints, they were self-made. We, the forces, decided what will be our rules of engagement. We, the forces, decided what will be the escalation ladder that we want to ride on. We decided how we want to control the escalation. So I want to make it very clear, there were no, I repeat, no restrictions on us. Full freedom was given to us to plan and execute.
Now it becomes very clear from the clip that what the leader of opposition Rahul Gandhi said in the parliament, that came straight from what the Indian naval advisor Shiv Kumar, Captain Shiv Kumar, had said in a seminar there in Indonesia. Now, in that seminar, Shiv Kumar, while accepting that the Indian Air Force had losses, he didn't quantify the loss. He attributed that to the constraints that were put on the Indian Air Force, that they were told not to hit the air defense systems of the Pakistan Air Force. Therefore, this was the right time for the Air Chief to clarify on that point, the point that had been raised by the Congress leader Rahul Gandhi, that whether that constraint was there or it wasn't there, but he did not speak specifically about this. Now, in his overall speech and this portion of the clip, the chief speaks about the reasons for the success of Operation Sindoor, which he attributes to three things. One, he says that there was political will. In this, he says that a very clear political objective was given, which was to teach the terrorists a lesson. And by political will, he meant that beyond this objective, giving the objective, no restrictions were put on the military leadership. They were given a free hand. If there were any restrictions, they were self imposed by the military leadership themselves, who decided the rules of engagement. So, that is one thing he says. Second thing, which he attributes to the success of Operation Sindoor, is the post of Chief of Defence Staff, which he said made a difference. And third, he said that I had full freedom. Now, let's examine all these 3 points that he has said, juxtaposing this to the big speech that he made on that occasion, where he said much more. Now, when we examine this part, which is the political objective to teach the terrorist a lesson, now, my question is, or rather anybody would ask this question is it fair, is it sensible, is it correct to use air power, which is, as far as India, Pakistan are concerned, this is the highest asset that we have for a terrorist operation. And then also was this constraint there or not that Shiv Kumar spoke about? That also should be clarified. I mean, what you are doing is on a terrorist target, you're using the Air Force, sending your missiles, breaching the sovereignty of Pakistan and expecting Pakistan not to retaliate. And the second thing that and he agrees that it was decided at a higher level, obviously at the political level, is that within 30 minutes, Indian DGMO reached out to the Pakistan DGMO asking for a ceasefire. So basically, what he talks about, the chief, the clarity of the political objective is really the terms of engagement that were given by the political leadership. The two are not the same, they are very different. Now, as far as he talks about the post of CDS, it made a difference. There is something that I want to tell the viewers. Recently, the Chief of Defense Staff, Anil Chauhan, he has written a book which is called Ready, Relevant and Resurgent. And this has a forward by the Defense Minister Rajnath Singh. And one of the key things that he mentions there is he has redefined, Anil Chauhan has redefined the definition of civil military fusion. What he says this means is that you fuse the military professionalism with political ideologies. Now, this has never happened before. I'll do a separate video on that. So, the point to make here is that obviously it is the Chief of Defense Staff who decided on the rules of engagement that the chief is talking about, that it was the military leadership that did that, the rules of engagement. And obviously, when you have a thinking like this of mixing political ideology, then the political leadership need not say anything. That was said by the CDS. So, third, he says is that I had full freedom. Now, if you do not, the terms of engagements, there is a constraint. If the rules of engagement, there is a constraint. I don't know what freedom he was talking about. And as far as the timing is concerned, I mean, it is very obvious to anybody that the timing was well chosen by the government, because the government is under extreme pressure because of what all has been exposed of the election commission. And the Congress leader Rahul Gandhi is in the lead in exposing all that. And plus, of course, there are pressures from outside also with America. So, to divert the attention, this was perhaps why the air chief was brought in my opinion. Thank you so much.